So this is the track we were working on last week. Now, this volume here is the output volume of this channel. I've got it routed here to the drum bus, right? But this is the output of this channel. What happens after the audio travels from here through this path here. And actually, maybe it's maybe a little bit easier to have the mix window up. So we've got the audio here, right? That audio is going through these two inserts or sets of inserts, right? We've got an EQ and a compressor plugged into the inserts, and then that is coming out of these outputs here. So this volume here has to do with what's coming out, not what's going in. Clip gain is what's coming in to the track. Now, why would you turn down clip gain as opposed to just turning the output volume down? Well, let's
leave headroom, right?
Correct. That's one reason why. But let me just tell you, right. Right. And to also get your gain structure correct. So, for example, if let's just solo this drum track. Let's say, for argument's sake, that this was the volume level that the drums were recorded at. Right. You see over here, I'm distorting the output meter, right? I could turn the volume down here and it's no longer distorting the output meter. That's true. But what's happening is that there is an optimal level that these plugins like to see, and they don't like to be overdriven. So you don't want it to be so soft that it's not driving the EQ and the compressor properly, but you want it to be loud enough that it's not, you want it to be at a level where it's not driving the output. Now, the output too hard. Now, in modern DAWs, it's not as important as it was maybe 10 or 15 years ago because they come with a lot of headroom, especially I know Pro Tools does. But it's good to get your gain structure set correctly so that now, for example, let me really exaggerate this. So I've got the output gain volume here at -33. So up here, we're no longer clipping, right? We're not overloading our output meter. But look what's happening to, and I'm exaggerating this because I've got plus 26 dB of clip gain. See, I'm distorting here, I'm in the red. So that's why you would use clip gain, to get a good level going in to your plugins. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, but before we mix, we're supposed to kind of like set the volumes for each track, right?
Right. You're supposed to get it so that when all the tracks are playing, you're in like, so that when all the tracks are playing with no plugins or anything, like your peaks are starting to get maybe into the yellow up here, right? I could give you like we don't really have in our school portfolio, or nor does Pro Tools come with a good output meter, right? Unfortunately. But from my perspective, like with this, right, you want to get everything together. The peaks are at like -12 or so. And this way that gives you room when you're adding other like EQ and you're adding maybe some volume in some frequency areas, or you're adding some reverb, which adds volume because there's more signal, or you will have a mastering chain, which we'll go over a little bit today, that you can make up that volume there. But if you don't leave yourself any headroom to play around with, it just makes all that stuff more cumbersome.
So what should your volume be around when you finish your mix?
I would say -6 is a good place.
Okay.
You could be higher than that, sure, because like but that's after mastering. I'll put something in that will like, for example, let me move this here. If I were to do some mastering, which I'm hesitant to teach because I'm not superb at it, but if I were to do something like this. Right. Oops, excuse me. I'm pushing all sorts of buttons. Everything's happening all at once. Oh, my goodness. So I've got, this is a mastering limiter. Right, so my peak gains, my very peak is just a little bit below -6 here. So I can make that up with this on the back end. And that gives me some room to play around with if I want to do some mastering. Let's say that I want to add some overall, let's move this down here. Let's leave this here and let's mute this. And then let me add some EQ, right? So let's say if I want to add some mastering EQ, which I do, and I'm just going to use my Pultec emulation, right? And if I wanted to add some warmth in the low end and a little bit of boost in the high end. So I'm adding some volume right now, right? If I bypass that. Right, and then I can, so that gives me room to add some coloration to the sound. Right, so that, that's a pretty good level for mastering. And because I've left it, if the peaks hit about -6 or a little below that, that gives me headroom with which I can do this other stuff to make up for the things that I can't do. I can't do with as well with some of the mixing, right? In other words, if I've mixed this, I still need a little bit more low end rather than redo the whole thing because I like the way it sounds. It's nice and clean. It's at a good level. Everything is balanced. I can just add a little bit on the mastering chain to make up for some of that stuff. So that's why I like to leave so that it peaks at -6. Now,
hey Pete.
Yeah,
it's Arun here. So would it be fair to say that, because this is something I didn't know about clip gain until that summer course, because my older version of Pro Tools doesn't have it.
Correct.
Does that mean that in terms of just the technique of mixing, you're basically never moving the volume faders anymore?
No, that's not true. I move it much less. Yes, I do move it much less, but to say that I never move it anymore would not be accurate.
Gotcha.
I particularly like clip based gain. I like mixing with that very much because there are other things you could do with clip-based things in Pro Tools, which I haven't taught you. So, for example, let's make up an example, all right? So let's say right here, I've got this little section right here. Let's say from measure 12 to measure 14, and I separate that out. And Pro Tools has something called clip effects, right? And you can get it from these controls here, which on your older Pro Tools, you wouldn't have it. So let's say on this particular area right here, I wanted to do, there was something I had and I wanted to boost. Right, and I wanted to add some more compression. Or let's say I wanted to, there's all this stuff here that you can use right here that you could do like on a particular clip. And that's particularly helpful when you're mixing vocals because vocalists have different timbres and different ranges and they move around when they sing. So they might get close to the mic where you'll get something like this and then they'll back off a little bit and you're missing some of that beef. So you might have a couple of spots where you want to add that beef, or there's a couple of spots where you might want to take some of the harshness off the high end. And that would be the same for your saxophone too. So you could do that very easily with clip-based gain. You could also automate the EQ, but I like doing it with clip-based gain. And clip-based effects. So
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't teach clip-based effects. It's not that it's advanced, but also you could see right here, I don't know if you could tell, but there's a little EQ in the upper right-hand side of that clip, which lets you know that there's a clip-based effect there. So if I open this up again and I turn that off, then that EQ goes away.
Gotcha.
There's, with all these DAWs, there's so much to learn, It's just like I have to, and with only two or three semesters to teach, I have to sort of make decisions as to what's the most important things.
I mean, it's just like learning an instrument, it takes a lifetime,
Well, not as long as learning an instrument, but yeah, it takes a long time. But learning the software, but what you do is you learn the basics, and then you add stuff as you go along. So, for example, in the film scoring class, one student asked something about retrospective recording, which I know that Pro Tools has, but I never use it. Right. So basically, if you play something MIDI, and you forgot to hit the record button, you think it's gone, but Pro Tools has a function called retrospective record, which is right here. And if you just click on that, it'll actually, the thing that you didn't record will actually get recorded.
Wow.
With MIDI. Well, Logic has it, which is why he was asking. But I never use it, but I knew it had it, so I had to look and find where it was. So I had to do a little research with that. So, I'm always learning stuff about this stuff too. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the inserts out. Or I'm going to actually, let me just mute all these inserts. All right. So the way I'm doing that, oh, hold on. You're not seeing that. Excuse me. Caught myself before you guys ragged on me. All right. So I'm just holding down the command key and clicking on these. And actually, if you hold down these three, the bottom three keys, and you click, see how it makes all of those in that column inactive? So you can just quickly make everything inactive just by clicking there on that. So I've got no plugins instantiated right now. We did some volume work last week, which will hold here. And I want to show you another way of going about a mix. So I've got a master track here. And everything is going through this master track before it goes out of the output of Pro Tools. So I'm going to take a listen to this. All right. So for me, it's sounding a little weak. All right. That's the first thing I'm noticing. So that's funny. Okay, it's funny because in my laptop computer, I've got some additional Pro Tools plugins that I don't have here. So, okay, so I'm going to use my EQ7, and I'm just going to use the basic plugins again. So it's a little weak. In other words, the whole track so right now, the way that this is going, the bass is too soft. So let me just, right, so I've got the volume on the bass way down. So I'm going to bring that up a little bit. Okay, so I've got this EQ in here, and I want to add some more fullness, right? So I'm just going to take this guy here and bring it up a little bit. Now, I'm not sure if you can hear this, but this is... Let me mute that mandolin. Let me mute all the melody track for a second. So listen to the low end, the kick drum, and the bass guitar. Right, so I've added some fullness to the entire low end. Now, I want a volume match as I'm going along. Right, so my output, I'm adding some volume with all these frequencies. So I want to lower the output so that these are the same. So that when you bypass it, you hear the low end, but you don't hear any volume difference. Okay. And I'm going to add some sheen on the top end. Now, this is interesting right here. So you can turn off all of these bands by clicking on the in. So I'm going to get rid of what I did there. Now watch what happens when I bring up this mid frequency here. And I'm going to sweep it so you can hear what's happening in the different pitch registers of this track. Right, do you understand what I'm doing here? I'm just sweeping through the frequency spectrum with this with this mid-frequency guy here. It's going higher than the green one, but it's just to show you what's living in what areas. Let me turn up the Q a little bit. I like that frequency. I like the way that sounded there. That was about 250, 260. I'm going to keep a note of that. I don't like this sound. It's very nasal. Now it's getting even more nasal. See how this is a little bit muddy here? Okay. Let me reset this. Let me bring these guys back in. So that was at it was 275 or so, right? Kilohertz.
What was that shortcut again to reset it to default?
Oh yeah, let me just show you that. Let me have this guy here. Option click. So let me just go up a little bit more. And then I'm just going to add a little bit there. So this is very flat sounding to my ears. That's clearer with a little bit more low end. Let me just see what they've got here. I'm going to mute this EQ for a second because I might really adjust it. So this is supposed to emulate a tube drive. Let me see what some of these presets are. Let's try clean amp. That's adding a little clarity as well. So I think what I might do is put that before the tube, before the EQ, and I might have to readjust my EQ. So this is with no plugins. Tube. Now let me exaggerate the tube. It's getting a little crunchy. It's distorted, right? So the headroom is how clean it is, even at no matter what the drive, you know, it gives you, in other words, if I have no headroom, lower headroom, it'll start to distort quicker. Right, so now if I turn the headroom up, it's cleaner. So what this is doing is it's adding harmonics to the sound, which is thickening the sound up. Let's see if we can see that in our spectra, whatever it is. Where's our Blue Cat audio? Frequency analyst. We've had some people leave us. All right, so let's bypass this. So I'm volume matching. So it seems to be adding more energy in this area here. Right, so that's too much drive. And now I'm going to add some dynamics here. And I'll add the BF76. Play around with the attack and the release. Okay, so now that the BF76 is in there, now here I want to bring the volume up because I want to get a higher level. So see how I'm only compressing very little? I don't want it to be something like this. Right, because that's killing the sound. So I just want it so that it compresses no more than like 2 or 3 dB at the highest peaks. and then just adjust my level here so I get a nice output. So I've got a fairly fast attack and a moderate attack and a fairly not a bad release. And I've got this set to 4-1. So now, when that bridge comes in, the second bass track is way too loud. It's compressing the entire track. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm approaching the mix from a different perspective. Last week we mixed each individual track to make it sound as good as we could. Today we're doing the opposite approach. I'm mixing from the master track, getting this to sound as good as I can, and now I'm going to go back and start to adjust individual tracks. And I'll need less. Hold on a second. There was a. No, Nicholas. So, what kind of? Yeah, what's right? Mic, interface, and headphones. You're in good luck, Nick. You're in good shape. If you have stuff that works, you don't need to pick up anything from the college. Like I know Huna has a recording setup, so she doesn't need to pick up anything from the college. So what I'm doing here is I'm getting the overall picture to a certain point, and now I'm going to start to work on individual tracks, and then I may have to readjust that overall picture a little bit as I'm working on them. But this already sounds... So I'm bringing the sound of my rhythm guitars down a little bit. Give me 1 second. Get these panned. I want to have these now. You won't hear this because Zoom is in mono, but okay. So I don't like. Okay, so I've taught some of you. I've taught this to, and some of you I haven't. I don't like the rhythm right there. So I'm going to separate this out, and I'm going to teach it from the beginning. I want to fix my rhythm here. Right? I'm not playing a tight rhythm there. I want to get that to sit better with this other guitar. So the first thing I need to do is I need to change this from sample bass to tick bass, which is right in this area here. And then go to polyphonic for elastic audio, right? We did that in Audio MIDI 1. And it takes a second for this to process. And now it's green again, and I can treat this like it's MIDI, and I'm just going to quantize to about 90%. That's better. So let me show you what I did there. This is called, for those of you that didn't have this, there's a way to there's multiple ways to affect the timing. You can use Beat Detective, but there's also this thing called elastic audio, which in this kind of a situation is very good. So what I have to do, what it does is it takes the time base for the audio file, instead of it being sample-based, it now becomes tick-based. So in other words, it locks into a tick on the timeline. And as we've learned, the tick is the space between each beat. So Pro Tools has 960 ticks. So it locks in the transients of a waveform to a certain tick on the timeline, and then you can quantize it similarly to Midi and do other functions as well, like pitch shift, transpose, and stuff like that. So the way you do that is you change the time base to ticks, and then you use the only two plugins that I teach are polyphonic and rhythmic. So if you've got a drum, a single drum, you would use rhythmic, not a drum kit, like a kick drum or a hi-hat or a snare drum. And everything else we're using polyphonic, even a vocal line. And then so in other words, I had to separate out this little area here, right? And then I just highlighted that and just option 0 and did some quantizing to it. And it made it fit better. Now, instead of EQing everything in the acoustic guitar, I'm going to go to the master now, and I'm going to EQ the master. And I'm going to do a high-pass filter, get rid of some of that low end. And then with guitars, I like to boost just a little bit around 4K. And my volume matching is pretty good. So you can really hear right there during that rhythmic section. No EQ. EQ's in. So when the EQ is in here, what I'm hearing is there's more clarity. It's very subtle, but it gets rid of some of the mud, especially doing this nice high-pass filter bit. Okay, so I'm going to make my effects active now. And the way that I'm doing that is, see, they're all kind of gray and italicized. If I just click on it, right click on it, I mean, make active. All right. So what's happening now, which you probably can't hear, is that the low end on the kick drum is causing too much compression. So I'm going to do just a little bit of an EQ here. I'm just going to bring a little bit down. I know it's around here. That's better. So, in other words, without this compressor on the master bus it's grabbing that low, the kick drum, and the kick drum is affecting the rest of the track, and I'm hearing it sort of sucking in the volume. So I just took down a little bit of the volume on the kick drum there, and it made that a little bit less obvious. Okay, so let's take a volume check on that the crash symbol on the downbeat here. 1, 2, 3. And this one here. Too loud or too soft? Or just right? One more time.
Too loud.
Correct. Thank you. So I brought it down 5 dB from where it was before. So let's add our melody guitar. So it sounded pretty good to me. I'm not having to add all this other stuff here. So this is actually a melody guitar and it's in the wrong spot. So I'm going to bring it down here. Right? And I need to change its color. And I need to get its output going into melody guitar. So I made a mistake and now I'm fixing it. And then what I need to do is I need to modify my group. So, right. So let me just show you this, right? So if I go here and I go to modify groups and then go here, I want to go to rhythm guitar and this is this track here. I don't want this in this group anymore. So I'm going to remove it from there. And then what I want to do here is go back to modify groups. And this time I'm going to select melody guitars. And then I'm going to add this one here. So now this is in part of this group here. So this needs to go into the room as well. So I'm just going to pop this up here. And I might turn the saturation knob back on because that's a little thin sounding. So, and I want to volume match my melodies. So my melody is here. Oops. Why is that not in there? I think I've got something incorrect. Oh, we want to add 21. Ugh, what an idiot. 20. Okay, great. Okay, so this is at one volume. Make sure the next volume is the same. Now, here's something really subtle. Listen to the last note of the mandolin and the first note of the acoustic guitar. They kind of clash. So what I want to do is a little volume automation. And so what I'm going to do is on the last well, I'd like to make sure that I come back in at the same volume on the next area, but I want to do a little decrescendo here. So I put a little dot here with the hand and click and pull this down. And that's the volume lane or volume view. Much better. Okay, so right here, we have the melody comes back in again. So the first time through, I've got this mandolin panned in the center. And you can't hear this because you're on Zoom, but here the second time through, we need to add a little reverb to that. So I've got this guitar and this, whoops, let's get this right here so that they're right next to each other, and this mandolin. So what I want to do is I'm going to automate panning on the mandolin. So the first time through, it's going to be in the center. And then the second time through in this harmony, I'm going to spread it out a little bit so that the mandolin might be a little bit to the left and this melody guitar doubled might be a little bit to the right. Now, I'm looking here and this is always playing with the mandolin. So I can just turn the panning here over right now. And then what I need to do here is go to pan and then take my hand and just match that. So it's 40 something. Let's make it about 25 and make this about 25 in the opposite direction. And then we've got a nice. Yeah, I'm going to try going a little bit further. Right, so in stereo, which if you watch this at some point on YouTube, you'll be able to hear it with headphones on, that it's the melody the first time through is right down the middle and then it widens out just a little bit. And what that does is that helps you to hear the two instruments playing the harmony part. Oh, sorry, we got a little melody here, right? Lead part. So I think I'm going to do the same thing I did with this guitar here. I'm just going to get this saturation knob up there to fatten it up a little bit. And then it needs to go through a room. And then I think I'm also going to add some of that tape slap that we had last week to this. Now, I've only got a little bit. That's up to just 15, right? Minus 15. And actually, there's a little bit too much low end in there. So with the saturation knobs, let me just clean up just a little bit of that low end. Like that. Better. Now, I've got this thing called crushed right here. Right? And I think that I might want to play around with that. So that's with this guitar here. So I'm going to send some of this signal through crushed. Huh. Does anybody hear that kind of fuzzy sound? I wonder what that is. All right. So let's do this. Let's make this pre-fader. And let's mute the guitar. Okay, so this is just what's coming out of crushed right now. We've done that pre-fader trick like we did. about compressing this. So I'm really crushing this to high heavens and distorted. Right? And now let's unpre, right? So it's back to normal. And we're going to solo that. And I'm going to bring up this just enough so that we can hear it. Is it too much now? Now just making the volume right. All right, so this is just showing you a different way of mixing. Like, so in other words, I kind of made it so that at first I went through and I balanced the levels, right? We did that last week, so I didn't have to do that this time. And then I started working on the master bus. And we've done this mix on the basically from the master bus and then backwards. So we've got and you'll notice that there's all of these. I don't have all these other plugins enabled. Now, this sounds good. I think the one we did last week was a little bit clearer, but this still sounds pretty good. But this is just yet another way to mix. Let me just save this as version 2. And let's open up version 1 again. All right, so we're back to where we were last week, all right? Now, I have a meter. There are places where you can get free meters online. I have to remember. We have them in school computers. Let's see if I have one in here. No, I don't. Okay, so let's just go to Soundfield, and I'm going to put in this thing called Analyzer. This has a frequency spectrum, which you guys should have downloaded the Blue Cat and installed it into your computers because that's free. And it has a volume meter over here, and then this is left and right. So I'm going to turn the target mode off right here, okay? And I'm just going to give you a quick, very basic mastering tutorial. I'm not a mastering engineer. You know, there are people who do this for real that will put me to shame, but I do put effects processors across the master bus or whichever my last music output is. And I do that in everything I write. So let's take a listen. Now I'm looking here and I'm seeing that I've got a lot of headroom to play around with. And I'm seeing that, you know, don't worry about this, about the phasing and everything, but I'm going to add an EQ in here. And I'll use our EQ7. And these both stay open because I have this red target mode turned off. Now, one little trick, right, is that if you go to Air Music Technology, they have kill EQ. And this is interesting because you can use this to hear what's happening in the highs, the mids, and the lows. So I'm going to turn off the mids and the highs, and I'm just going to listen to the low frequencies. Okay, so can you guys still hear that? I mean, it's very murky sounding.
Yeah, you can hear.
Okay, so for me, I'm listening to that, and I have to add some more EQ to the rhythm guitar. I'll bypass this. So it's the rhythm guitar is getting in the way of the bass and the bass drum, low frequencies on the rhythm guitar. So I clean that up a little bit. Let's listen just to the mid. Okay, so I'm hearing that there might be just a little bit of mud in the mid area, and that typically for me is about 500. So let me exaggerate this. I've got plenty of low end on this, right? So that's good. I just use that to listen to make sure that my low end was really clean, that there weren't like all these crazy rhythms going on, and that really to listen to make sure that the acoustic guitar wasn't getting in the way of the bass and the bass drum. So I might want to add a little bit more harmonic activity to this like I did the last one. So let's get that tube drive. Let's play around with that a little bit. And let's go back to this clean amp and turn the drive way down. So I could see more activity in this area here with the tube drive. Now, be careful with this, right? You could, like if I were to do this, right? You could all hear how that sounds bad, right? Just a little bit fills it up. And volume matching. So making sure the output, when I bypass it, it just is the effect. You don't, it's not louder. And this time, I'm going to use something called Maxim, which is part of Pro Tools. This isn't so great, but it'll bring the volume up and it will limit it. So when you have this here, make sure that the noise shaping is on and it's at 20-bit. And I'm just going to bring the threshold down. Now, you can also bring the mix of this down. So there's no Maxim. I mean, I could really make it crazy. That's really crushing everything, but just want to bring up. Okay, so you see, when I did that, it automatically made that that little bridge guitar there. See how that made this louder? So see, I'm using the volume knob here. You know, the output here, because I have this all. I like the way it sounds, so I don't want to change the way that it's driving this. I just want the output of this to be a little softer. All right, so that's pretty good sounding using just the stock Pro Tools plugins. That's, and you know, that's that would go on, that could go on television. I'd spend like maybe another half an hour. I mean, I finished the whole mix, but I'd spend like maybe another hour or so tweaking it a little bit just to fine tune things and make sure it was the way I liked it. But just using the stock Pro Tools plugins, I can get a really, really good mix. Some of my other plugins have character, and I like the reverb on. The reverb is the one big thing in Pro Tools that they need to improve on. Logic definitely has much better reverb plugins for sure. But okay, so what we've gone over today is sound design using time-based effects and other things for creating interesting timbres that we made into a quick sampler instrument. Went over a different way to mix the same track from the master bus backwards. I'm not saying which one is better. I just wanted to expose that to you. And then here we worked on mastering a mixed track. When you're mastering, it should be just, you don't want to overdo it, right? With the, you know, with the EQ, I just have a little tiny little dip. I haven't gone like crazy doing stuff like this. Or stuff like this. It's very subtle, right? I'm just taking a little bit of the mud out of the midsection. Remember, I used that kill EQ to listen to my low end to make sure it was nice and clean and not muddy with all sorts of strange rhythms happening and frequencies that you don't pay attention to clashing with each other. And that usually for this type of a track was between the acoustic guitar and the bass guitar and the kick drum. So I left a lot of room in the low end so that the kick drum and the bass could fill that out. And you get a really nice heartbeat and drive that way. And you can fill out the rest of the spectrum with the other instruments.